pitchers and catchers. Pitchers and catchers. Pitchers and catchers. The day is finally here. Pitchers and catchers have reported it is officially the beginning of the countdown to baseball. We're going to talk about prospects 5 through 1 today. We're going to have a little bit of fun, as always, discussing new rules, former players, and, of course, the stars of the future on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thank you for listening to Locked On Guardians. As they say at the end, they're your team every day. I want to thank you for making it your first listen, and also want to take a moment and say that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. I am Jeff. That is Justin over there. No cat yet. We will see if Cinnamon decides to join us. A lot of people were commenting about how much they enjoyed her just staring at the camera for large parts of the show. So if you missed that, tune into about the 33 mark of yesterday's show. I've got some, I want to, take a moment here and again, thank everyone who is doing the part, downloading and all of that jive. We thank you and appreciate that. Even in the very end of the off season here, we know it is picking up with pitchers and catchers. I do want to say Justin, wrong side, retweeted a bunch of great videos and stuff. So make sure to go check out his Twitter, which if you're watching on YouTube is right there. If you're not, it's at JL_baseball. So in terms of a few things I wanted to do just in the old knock them off the rule change is not one we really discussed, but it sounds like they kind of made a late decision to enforce balks more. That anyone who's very herky-jerky, the names that came up across baseball were Kenley Jansen, Mike Clevenger. Those are the two I saw the most. But anyone who has a lot of movement, because this is such an interpretation rule, I'm curious to see how much they actually enforce it, because they've been very willy-nilly on pitcher things. And then, but yeah, anyone who's got a lot of movement could be at greater risk of this. I also think like those guys who have kind of some of the bounciness, it's going to be harder with the pitch clock. So they're really making it hard on that subset of players. And then number 2, I warned Justin, I had something fun that doesn't relate to our main topic. But listen, we're recording on Valentine's Day. Let's just go ahead and put that out there. So my question is, I have a 2-part thesis I am going to make. And then Justin can comment and say if I'm totally wrong or totally not wrong. So my 2-part thesis is A, the player who most loves Cleveland in my lifetime, I feel like, is Jose Ramirez, because I don't think any player has ever turned down more money to stay here. And player 2, the biggest heartthrob in the history of Cleveland baseball in my lifetime, feels like Grady Sizemore. I can't think of any player who really captured the attention of we had Grady's ladies for a reason. Am I wrong in this? Is there someone I'm underestimating? Is there someone who maybe had a bigger tie to Cleveland, someone who was born here? Was there someone who was more of a heartthrob than Grady Sizemore on these days? I'm not going to bring up the most interesting relationship history of any. Actually, I'm going to. Not the one you think. I'm not going to talk about anyone currently related to the team. There was 2 famous New York Yankees who swapped wives and did a whole family switch, and one of them came to Cleveland, and I can't think who they are right now. So what I want you to do is comment below if you can remember the wife swap players, or family swap. It wasn't just wives, they swapped kids, everything. Crazy story. Couldn't get away with that anymore. And then if you think there's someone who is a more beloved or / loves Cleveland more baseball figure, or who the heartthrobs are, I'm forgetting, but now to Justin while everyone else is typing.
Perfect. No edits. Grady Sizemore. We'll forget about the teacup incident, but
I cannot forget about that incident.
Yeah, since we're talking about after dark activities here, obviously on Locked On Guardians. Geez, it was a
large mug. That was no teacup. That was a large mug, my friend.
Okay, well, whatever. I wasn't really paying attention to the mug, but yes, Grady Sizemore, perfect. No edits. That was one of my favorite players growing up. After Jim Thome, my top 3 all time. It's tough. My top 2 is some version of Thome and Grady, and yeah, hard to think. I don't know. Carlos Baerga loves Cleveland. Carlos Baerga just likes being part of baseball, so maybe it's not Cleveland, but I'd say
loves
he's up
being
there.
Loved.
He's
Carlos
always
Baerga
around.
loves love.
He's always around. And then there's
Albert Bell, of course, who just loved
Oh yes,
everyone.
Albert Bell loved Cleveland. Yes, all the eggs thrown his way and all that stuff. I'm trying to think. There was somebody else who, I mean, Jason Kipnis really liked it here. I felt like he was a very well liked, a person who really embraced Cleveland. So there is that.
No, Grady Sizemore is always going to be the great what if of my lifetime. It's going to be hard for anyone else to top that. He will be the one where you're like, his comps by age were Duke Snyder and Barry Bonds. It's just him and Brandon Webb, similar time and the way they fell apart. Big what ifs.
Brandon Webb.
Now, who could be the Brandon Webbs or the Grady Sizemores of this team? You'd typically think it's the top 5 prospects, and that's who we are going to get into today. We're going to move through these players, give them a little bit more time. I'm going to, since I have the mic, just go ahead and say my number 5, and I'm also going to say this because someone Justin has already talked about in yesterday's show, if you want to go back and hear his take. I have Rocchio. I have Rocchio here over Angel Martinez, even though I think Martinez's ceiling is higher with the bat. I think Rocchio is a little safer. I think his low-end outcome is similar to a less athletic Ahmed Rosario. Because, I mean, Ahmed Rosario runs really well. Like he's a really exceptional athlete. Probably doesn't get enough credit for how good of an athlete he is. But in terms of what he does offensively, I really think that's more of the mid-low. I'm not like low as he's a utility guy. Like that's still possible. But his mid-low outcome is close to what Ahmed gives us, which is a league average shortstop, a guy who's in that 12 to 18 range, the middle of the pack type, which is a good player. It is a good player. I don't want anyone to sit there and think I'm just like bashing him all the time. He's a good player. I think the Guardians have the advantage of several players like Rocchio who could be better than good. He does a bit of everything, right? He's got a lot of skills in that bag. He has improved at every level. He has kind of continually gotten better and gotten stronger. And even though, like I said, I think Martinez has a hair, well, not a hair. I think he's got I don't know if between a hair and significant mid-ground, a mid-level higher offensive ceiling. Rocchio's safety and Rocchio's I think he's got, just better fielding outcomes as well. Gives him the slight elevation here. But if you told me Martinez ends up being better long run, I wouldn't be shocked. But they were close. Rocchio's safety. I am, as we get into this, you're going to see I lean into safety.
Yeah, and that's how I've usually had my list in the past too, is I've ranked higher, and I do have other guys like that too. So I think the final 4 of our list is going to be very similar. So
yes,
newsflash, it might be a little bit boring, but we'll tell you why. I've always kind of ranked based on safety as well at times. But I've learned to lean into a little more risk depending on how good I think the upside is. I guess that I've kind of leaned more into upside if it's there. I think in the past with the Guardian system, it hasn't always been there. They've always, because this is an organization that drafts for safety, right? This is not an organization.
More of late.
Yeah. I mean, they've drafted a little more risk lately. I think in certain years, I mean, the risk goes along with what high school, anything high school related is more risk. And they've taken some risks and I guess in some respects, Chase the Lauder was a bit of a risk as well, but
I agree.
Yeah. But no, I think you're right on Rocchio. I think the thing with him is that there is a high ceiling there, right? I think all these years he's been ranked as one of the up and coming prospects, whether he was like a guy to watch or he started getting on the top 100s as he got into the low minors, and then he started to break out, and then after the pandemic, and then the last couple of years where he started to hit the top 100 lists. I think we always felt like there was a good ceiling there, there still is a good ceiling for Rocchio, but I wonder if we're getting to the point where people, again, I don't know if this is like, post or prospect fatigue or post hype fatigue, whatever you want to call it, with him because he's been around a while, but I wonder if the ceiling is going to be there for him, or if this is just kind of who he is. Maybe he's better in the pros or the majors than he is in the minors.
Yeah, the people who called him Little Lindor at points was just grossly unfair to him. I've hated that.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there are some similarities mechanically in the swing and I guess the body type and things, but man, that's just a hard thing to project. I think him and Rocchio or Martinez and Rocchio are very similar in a lot of ways. The only thing I think whoever you feel like is going to be a shortstop long term is higher, right? Like if someone told you Martinez is a for sure surefire shortstop, would you have him higher than Rocchio?
Yes.
Yeah. So it really comes down to who do you believe can play shortstop long term. And I've said I think Rocchio probably is the better shortstop of the two between him and Martinez, but I think Martinez can play shortstop. I'm not saying he's a better shortstop than Rocchio, but I think he can play shortstop enough to where it can be an option for him. That's why I have Martinez at 5, because I like the approach at the plate way better. And again, I like I said yesterday with Oscar Gonzalez and Rocchio to a point, some other guys, it's a blind spot in sort of ways with guys who don't walk a lot and just have a more aggressive approach. It's harder to predict the future with them. If that's going to work in the majors. They have to make a high amount of contact. They have to be able to recognize breaking pitches. They have to be able to recognize what pitches they can hit and what pitches they can drive. And when you don't take as many walks, it's harder to project. So that's why I like Martinez a little bit better, because his discipline at the plate is a little better. He's younger. I know we've said this past offseason that, you have to be careful about how much weight you put into age per level. But Martinez is extremely young for his level, and he performed very well at high A and double A. And like I said, I think he could play shortstop. They both have great baseball IQs. These guys are both, Rocchio had the nickname the Professor, and Martinez has the bloodlines with his dad and I think his uncle, who both played in the majors. So, he's got the instincts too. I just think Martinez projects maybe a little better with his approach at the plate, and it'll be depending if he grows into any power. If it's like, because I think both guys are like 15 to 20 home run power, but I think it's more likely Rocchio gets the 20 home run power than Martinez. I think Martinez still has some growing to do to get there. But yeah, I've got Martinez all the way up at number 5 on my list this year, which is a big jump. I have to go back and look and see where I had him last year.
Yeah, he's definitely, both these guys are players we probably heard more about as they were moving up. And they both lived up to the hype. Not everyone does. We're not going to bury anyone at this point in time, but not everyone lives up to the hype. And so far, I feel like, these two and Valera really have. They're up there and performing. Speaking of things that live up to the hype, we're going to get into the top 4 prospects. Maybe I've got a surprise. Maybe there's someone you don't expect up there. Maybe I did a flip the table move. You'll have to tune in and see who the top 4, why they're there, and why I believe our order is going to be different than anyone else's. But first, the quick note on someone with fantastic potential in their own right. A whole company that's potential is through the roof, and that is our friends at FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. We'll get into Petco later in today's show, I think. Or the
Petco Park?
No, not Petco. The Pacoda.
Pacoda projections.
Pacoda projections say, again, what we say, bet the over on the Guardians. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel.com, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So player 4 on this list. I had my 4 first. Why don't you lead us off for 4?
Okay, at 4, I think we're going to come very similar. I have Bo Naylor at number 4. I think what he did last season, I don't want to say turning his career around, but kind of.
Yeah. If he had repeated last year, he's not in a top 30 list. He's not in our top 50.
Sure.
Like, if he had repeated what he did, then his career would. Maybe the Guardians do trade for Murphy because they have no option. Like, I mean, he did turn his career around.
Yeah, I do. I think he got his. I
know there's health and other things, but
no, not necessarily health. It's just he had a good 2019 at low A, and then he missed all of 20. Obviously, already missed 2020, and they jumped him to double A. So I think he just got his career back on track. I think he overcame some issues, and had to make some swing changes and some some approach changes to the plate, which really helped him. But now he's back to kind of being the player that people project him to be. And now he's kind of added speed to his game. Obviously, he has taken his role as a catcher seriously as far as working with pitchers, and he's learned Spanish. And these are things that don't show up in they do show up in scouting reports if you watch the player in person. They don't show up on stat lines, right? Like hearing about how he has taken on that kind of role in working with the pitching staff and how he has really grown defensively. There are still a lot of drawbacks defensively. I think there's still going to be some issues framing. I think there are still going to be some issues blocking, framing. Who knows how long of an issue that'll even be with automated strike zone at some point. Like that may be not a concern. So really, he'll have to concentrate on blocking and throwing runners out. But he does have an above average arm, so that's a positive for him. Walks a ton, has real power, has speed obviously on the bases. He's a very dynamic player. We'll have to see what happens with the platoon splits, if he can hit lefties or not. I'd have to go back and look and see it against lefties last year, but even 1 year minor league samples aren't always the most reliable. But I think the intangibles too, and this is why I didn't drop Bo Naylor out of the top 10 last year, even after coming into 2022, because I had bet on the player, bet on the guy's bloodlines, his work ethic, how much the organization likes him, how, all these things that he's always played with against higher competition going back to his days in high school, the athleticism. When you bet on that kind of player, you give him kind of a mulligan. And that's what we're doing with Brian Lavastide this year in some respects. So Naylor deserved that mulligan. He fell in a lot of lists last year.
Mine.
Mine. Well, I mean, just everywhere.
Call a spade a spade. Yeah, Mine, he was not. He was closer to 20 on my list. I think he was in the 20s. I'd have to pull the podcast. I don't know if I actually wrote it down anywhere, but I'm one. Like I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. Like, that's how you learn and you grow.
I mean, I could have been wrong. Obviously, I could have said he was still deserved to be in the top 10, and he could have come back last season and done what he did in 2021, and I would have been wrong. But I just was guessing that he would be able to figure things back out based on everything we knew about him. So, and he did. So he's number 4 on my list this year, because I think he'll be. Look, the bar for a average starting catcher is so low. I'd have to go back, but there have been. I was looking at the numbers a while ago, and I was doing my rankings. Like there has only been a handful of guys over the last 5 years, not even counting 2020, who have put up a 2-WAR season as a catcher. It's not a lot. So the bar for being a league average catcher is pretty low. I think Naylor clears that bar, and that's easy enough to call him a top 10 prospect in the system and a top 5 for me.
I was really kind of debating. I was like, does Brian Shaw still qualify? Can he slide into this spot? Since we're trying to figure out where he's going to slide into this baseball team eventually, it feels like we're kidding. It's Naylor. Like, listen, he did it all this year. There's not a lot of guys who have 2020 potential, and
as a catcher,
he walked at a high rate, which again in the lower minors doesn't have as much meaning, but it is something in the upper minors. That is a point where you're like, okay, this is something of value we need to look at, discuss, and consider. But yeah, no, I, look at his production and think, it's again, it helped at the AAA level because of how that park is and everything else. He did get a little bit of a benefit from that, but that's when you also look at, 50 games is not an insignificant amount at the AA level, where he also performed very well, and we kind of saw what he can bring to the table. So yeah, I think you have to be excited and happy. And, for all the catching problems they have had and all of the catchers they have attempted to develop and the not a lot of success for those, he looks really close. And, hopefully we'll see him step up and, really perform this year.
Yeah. Whenever we do have a chance to see him at a bat, like we said before, he'll probably start the year in AAA. And, I'll be interested to see what he does for Team Canada too, because that's going to be, real competition out of the box in spring training for him that you wouldn't normally see. I know we had some people commenting before too, saying, "Are you worried about his 8-game sample size?" Yeah, and I was like, 8 games? No, I'm not worried. If it had been his 87-game sample from 2021, yes, I would have been worried. The walk rate, I don't know anything. The walk rate, we talked about this yesterday. The walk rate in AAA, we said we had to take some of that with a grain of salt because of the baseball. and the pitchers and things like that in AAA. And he did go from walking 20% of the time bat in AA back to 12% of the time in AAA. So I wonder if he'll settle into a lower rate in the majors. But
I would bet on it.
It would still, I would imagine we're still talking like a 9 or 10% walk rate, maybe 8 at the worst.
Agreed.
Once he settles in. So that's still going to be a healthy rate as long as he keeps the strikeout rate somewhere in the mid 20s, which is probably where he'll end up being. Although, some of that I think is due to being passive too. He does have a little bit of passivity to his game too, which I guess is kind of a concern, but not as much. Considering we're talking about a catcher here, I think it makes a big difference because we're talking about, again, a low bar for a good offensive catcher.
And it is kind of funny because for so long basically the book on him was, he's a third baseman, and it kind of goes to show a lot of people didn't think he'd be able to stick a catcher. So it's, an accomplishment that he did. And it's just kind of interesting to see how he continues to grow. And again, that might be more than, this might be something people would be surprised to hear me say, but more than like the statistics or anything else, is just like how much he has worked at all aspects of the game. You mentioned the bilinguality and the things like that he has worked on. And it's like, that is where like I really get excited because I mean, this dude puts in the work.
Mm-hmm. They ask of their catchers too. If you don't do it, it's hard to stick a catcher in this organization. That's why he has. A lot of people thought the bat would push him to the majors, like Oakland's Tyler Soderstrom, right? Like his bat is way above his defense. They pretty much just scrapped the catcher thing, and that could have been the case for Naylor. We could be talking about Naylor in the majors like sometime this year as a first, or not even last year as a first baseman himself, if they had just decided, okay, we're not going to have him catch because we like the bat. And he might have, catchers develop slower. And they've challenged him so much. Like at age 19, he goes right to low A. He doesn't even go to short season, doesn't hold back. He goes right to low A and he puts up a solid season. Obviously, double A was tough for him, but he was playing against a lot of older competition with in travel teams in Canada too. And he was an amateur. So he has always played against older competition.
Yeah, I feel like I better cut you off here. We're never going to get through our top 3 as we're approaching 10 minutes on Naylor. Let's go 3. Third on my list, I know we've been going back and forth, but since I cut you off, did what everyone loves, let's just go ahead. I have Gavin Williams at 3. The reason he is at 3 is, listen, I just have to explain this now. I look at health risk because, again, talking, the great John Sickles, why do pitchers fail? The inability to keep the ball in the zone and injury. Like an injury is number 1. There are health risks. There were teams who, like, his medicals were very scary for some teams. Like, he was off boards. There were teams who wouldn't even consider drafting him. Do they regret that now? Maybe. Like, I think he'd probably be a top 10 pick if you redid that draft now. But this stuff is really good. The performance is fantastic. That's one of the best debut seasons I've ever seen. He's got, front of the rotation potential. Just when I'm looking at the whole picture with this team, he's got a little bit more risk due to health. And that's really the only reason that he is not, 1 or 2 is just the health concern, which, he isn't the only one with, is what holds him back a little bit more for me. But I think he is, there's a reason why I was like, I've been driving the Sean Murphy bandwagon since that dude was at Wright State. I was literally the only person who gave him a first round grade, and I still said I wouldn't trade any of the big 3 for him. And there's a reason why, like that. He's got a chance for, I think, 3+ pitches, and the stuff is just unreal. And you just health. That's it.
Yeah, it really is just health for him. And I think it's also command too. Okay. That's the thing. Like the positives, I also have Gavin Williams number 3 again. I said our last 4 were going to be boring because we're not going to have a whole lot of debate. But I mean, quickly, the positives for Gavin Williams, obviously, it's a high octane fastball, can get up to 99. It's just got incredible vertical on it and so much spin at the top of the zone. It's hard for hitters to square up. The slider is disgusting. The curveball is huge. He can throw both of those. And the changeup does lack a little bit to me. It's a power changeup, but I think it's too firm. And I think the only downside I saw last season, besides the injuries, is that there's a lot of non-competitive pitches. I feel like he's either nibbling sometimes or he's trying to go for the strikeout versus just pitching. And there was a good article the other day in Baseball America that if you have a subscription, I urge you to check out. And it talked about the Rays' approach to improving guys' control. And it was essentially just throw the ball down the middle of the plate. If you have good stuff, chances are it won't be down the middle anyway, because your stuff is so good and it moves. It'll do whatever. This is something Cleveland did with Jake Westbrook back in the day. Remember when Jake Westbrook was a relief? This is going to be a weird.
They tried it with Fausto as well, or Roberto.
Yeah, when you have stuff like that, and I think Corey Kluber to an extent too, just throw it down the middle, let your stuff do the work, and that has improved the Rays' control. And I think Gavin Williams would benefit from that because his stuff is absolutely nasty. I think it just times. I don't know if he's just fishing for a strikeout, but he had a lot of non-competitive pitches in Akron. Some of his outings were just short, and it's not due to lack of stuff. It was just sometimes he was getting behind in the count, or was going 0-2 and getting it back to 2-2. So that's my only concern there. I think he's an interesting medium between the other two pitchers we're going to talk about, but he also could be the rare starter who can dominate without a plus changeup, because he's got the slider that he can toy with righties on. He's got a curveball that he should be able to work in left-handers. I know usually the curveball goes into the hitter's bat path, but if he can back foot the curveball on them, because it's so big and it's so vertical, it might work. There's not a lot of guys that succeed without a changeup as far as being a top of the rotation starter, but I think Williams can. It's just, to me, it's a matter, like you said, it's health, and I think he's got to shore the control up a little bit. I worry about, like I said, just some non-competitive pitches and just getting the ball over the plate and then letting his stuff do the talking for him.
Yeah, no, that all seems fair. Why don't you lead us off with number 2? Or actually, before we do it, I'm going to cut you off again. I lied.
Oh, no.
We should take our break here at this point in the show. I know I'm not supposed to use the words break, but hey, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and get into the top 2 and why we probably disagree with the consensus at the top of the board. We'll get into it. We have very good reasons. You're going to hear it all on today's episode of Locked On Guardians. Okay. What now? Lead us off. Now that I've been the annoying person and did all of that yet again, explain why it is that this team, who's number 2?
Yeah, I don't think I think we're one of a few people that don't have Daniel Espino at number 1, but I have Daniel Espino at number 2. Obviously, what else can we say about Daniel Espino that hasn't already been said? I mean, a ridiculous fastball, right? A workout warrior. The guy has incredible flexibility, takes care of his body, really has to, honestly. I mean, he had obviously a fantastic season a year ago in terms of production when he was on the field. He wasn't on the field very long, but obviously plus 80 grade fastball some places, maybe a 70, depending on how you feel about it. Easily 2 more, 3+ pitches. The changeup's coming along. Control came along last year. I think it's probably easy to say if Daniel Espino throws 100 innings last season, I think we both think he's number 1, as long as he stayed on the pace he was started off on. He struck out 35 guys in 18 innings. He struck out over half the batters he faced. So, if he pitches even 90 innings last year, I think we both feel like he's number 1, right?
I don't know if I got that. I think I need about 100. It's more like how long, if it was like if he came back, and got a few more in, or if he had just been like ticky-tacky things here and there. But it's the seriousness of like a knee injury that was pretty significant, and then the elbow injury. And like, listen, I sat here and did the show. I was hosting this podcast on draft night when he was selected. And I was like, well, he's really interesting. At one point, I thought he'd be a top 10 pick. He's a no doubt future MLB player as long as he stays healthy. The one thing is he's going to get hurt and miss significant time. And I called it the minute he was drafted. Like it is a lot of, he's putting a lot of stress on his body with his delivery. And like for people who hate that type of delivery, like there were people, again, I'll go back to it. Like, listen, Cleveland's not afraid to take those big swings, but there are people who had Brady Aiken off their board because of injury stuff. Obviously, that's not what you want to hear there, but it's also like Ethan Hankins was off boards, Gavin Williams, Daniel Espino. Teams that are more risk adverse want nothing to do with these guys. And we'll see if it works out for, listen, Hankins still has a chance. We'll see. Like, there's some places that are very high on him. But yeah, I mean, Espino was voted the best fastball and slider in the minors. as long as he stays healthy, and this isn't like a James Caprillion situation where, like, I mean, I don't know if people remember how good he was before he got to Oakland, before his arm just kind of fell off, and he's never been quite the same guy. As long as we can avoid that, like, your worst case scenario is having another Class A in the bullpen. Like, I honestly believe his stuff is on that level that he could be. Imagine, like, if he can't hold up a starter because of the violence and everything in that delivery. And I'm not saying he won't. If I have him second, I believe he will. Obviously, if I thought he was a relief only guy, he'd be much lower. But as long as he can return from injury where he is right now, you could have Class A and Class A Part 2 in the 8th and 9th inning. And that's the thing too. Like, we get to the postseason this year, if his innings count is low enough, like, you could have that. That's the thing that can keep managers cold sweats at night, is that combination at the back of a pen.
Yeah, speaking of, you're talking about Edwin Diaz, right? Like, that's if you think Edwin Diaz is the number one closer in baseball above Class A, I won't fault you for that. But Daniel Espino could be Edwin Diaz to Manuel Class A. Like, that's how good he could be as a reliever. So, yeah, the floor is really good if he can stay healthy. If you can get 50 innings out of him in the bullpen and keep him healthy, that's fine. And that's still good enough to make him a ridiculously good prospect, because guys like that don't come along every day. So even if he doesn't end up being a starter, it's still fair to rank him as, extremely high, because, closers like that just don't grow on paper or grow on trees. Trees turn into paper.
You turn into paper. Yeah. So, yeah. Same thought.
A weird roundabout. They don't just show up, So obviously there's a lot more value there if he is a starter long term. So that's how we said, if he had thrown 100 innings, I think there's no doubt he's the number one prospect. It also depends on the injury too, because look, if he had been out with a knee all last year, I'd be less concerned myself. But the fact is, the shoulder injury developed because of the knee. This isn't the first time we've heard about a knee and a shoulder issue with him. So these aren't new things. That's the concern. And this is where you and I both kind of went risk averse with our ranking. So obviously, number one, not super hard to figure out who our number one prospect
I said in
is,
December,
right?
he'd be my number one. Like, I think I might have come to the conclusion a little bit before you, not to get too braggy. But I think the only reason I got there is just because I'm risk adverse. Like, I am the guy who has been on record as saying, listen, I would have never drafted Daniel Espino because I don't believe in drafting prep pitchers in round one. So, like, I am that guy. So I am extremely risk adverse. So it should be no surprise that it's Mr. Bibby, right? That's what everyone's calling him on all the interviews everywhere. I mean, I'm just teasing if any of his family is listening. By B. Let's say it again for all the people. By B.
Bilingual B.
B.
By B.
Yeah.
Yes.
A B that speaks 2 languages. That Bibby thing has been kind of interesting to watch who says that. Listen, he was not the guy a year ago. I thought it would be Denholm. I've talked about that. And
Same.
then, when they drafted him out of Poultron, I was like, well, interesting. Like, because he was a guy who'd been draft eligible for 2 years. And I was like, well, he fits their mold. But the jump, like, and limiting and across multiple levels. And he's throwing harder now this offseason than he threw during the season. He just keeps getting stronger. And I don't believe there's any, like, even minor injury history with him that has popped up. Like, it's a clean bill of health. His stuff is getting better and better. The control is still there. The secondary offerings are strong, and the velocity and the spin and everything else just keeps building up. And he's the safest guy. If you could guarantee me all of these players would stay healthy with no injuries at all, yes, Espino's one. But when you can't guarantee that, I'm going to lean towards the guy who's also got potential ace stuff, whether or not you want to. I just think some places are slow to catch up. I mean, we know places have been slow to catch up on him. He should have been, in the top 10 discussion midseason. And a lot of places he wasn't. He was, like, not even in the top 20 yet. And he's really, I had Oakland fans being like, could he be a third piece? I'm like, he is not a third piece. Like, he is not a third piece. Like, people were still slow to really catch up to him. And I think they're still catching up. And the thing is, like, if you're playing catch up, then you're way behind, because all he's done is improve, even when the season is not occurring.
I am going to make my bold prediction now. I think we can. I usually save these before, because last year when I did it over at GBI, and I'll do it again for my newsletter. We'll probably do it here as well. I usually do my bold prediction, but last year I had Will Brennan breakout as my bold prediction. I didn't have him making the majors. That was wild, but I had him as the breakout prospect last year. I'm going to say that the Tanner Bybee cements himself this season as the organization's number one prospect. And I would not be surprised if he forces his way up into Cleveland sometime this year. I think they know exactly what they have in him, and he's getting better. He has worked his tail off, and he's got at least every pitch he has. All 4 pitches are at least average. At the very worst, his curveball is probably average, and that's everything else is above that. And the changeup is a weapon to lefties. He'll throw it to righties. The slider kills righties. The fastball's good. He's throwing harder. He might throw 100 this year.
There's my bold prediction. He'll hit 100 this year. Yeah,
he'll hit 100 this year. I think
he might hit 101 even at the rate he's going.
Yeah. If you want to knock anything, we'll see. There were some places where I don't know if he can sustain the fastball velocity. He was 93 to 96 all year, 97 last year. It was April to September, 93, 97 all year. There was no he didn't draw back to the 90, 93 like he did in college. He was there all year, and he's getting stronger and he's getting better. The only the knock you could say on him last year was, okay, the fastball at times, if you left it in the zone, could be elevated and hit for home runs. He did give up his share, a little bit of home runs in low A. He gave up less in double A for whatever reason. That's interesting. But you could say maybe his fastball could be prone to home runs against better hitters. And maybe he relies on it too much and he's got to go with his secondaries more just because, guys are sitting fastball. But if he's throwing 100, if he's throwing 96, 97, 98 and hitting 100, that may make up for whatever issues he might have had with the fastball there. So, and maybe the other thing you could say is there's maybe some effort to his delivery. He is a grunter, and he I don't want to say it's a full body delivery, but it's because he has the build and the strength to do all of it. It's just he does put a lot of effort into it. I'm not sure what the best way to say that is, but there is some effort to the delivery. Not like violence where he's going to get hurt or lose control, because he obviously doesn't walk anybody. He just puts everything. He wants to throw the living crap out of the ball is what I'm saying. That's what he wants to do, and he does it.
But he doesn't overthrow. There's that fine line.
No, it's still because of his strength and his athleticism that he's really improved over the last year. It doesn't matter, but I'm nitpicking tiny things here, and that's such a small thing. That's why he is a safe prospect, and there's still maybe more ceiling in the tank than we thought before. That's why he is both of our number one prospects. It's super boring for us to agree on the top 4, but not the first time we've been doing this off podcast for years, talking baseball, and we've agreed on everything except for Will Smith and eggnog, and we're still agreeing everything here.
Yeah, well, and we disagreed on the new rules from yesterday, which we talked about in the after
show.
A
little bit.
But yeah, I think it just he keeps getting better and better, and you'll see outdated scouting reports that are not big on the changeup, and that's kind of a sign that if they're saying that changeup is not not a weapon, then that's kind of your sign to move on again. And listen, it's an impossible job if you're an evaluator, especially if you're covering multiple teams. We're lucky; we're mostly covering one team, so it's a lot easier. But yeah, he's the real deal, and Espino gets a lot of hype, and justifiably so. But Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams, I mean, these guys are really, really good.
Who is the best 5th round pick in the system in organization history? I know you've done this recently. Who is the best 5th round pick they've had?
I don't think it was Bieber yet. Let me. It's a good question. I thought
Bieber was a 3rd round pick.
No, it wasn't. Bieber wasn't. He was at least I thought he was at least a 4th.
No, maybe Savali was.
No, he was the 4th round for Bieber. I'm sorry. So in the 4th round, okay. Oh no, I didn't change this. So if I go ahead and pull franchise 4th round, Guardians go right now. It's Bieber and Corbin Burns. By the way, were both taken in the 4th round that year. How about that?
Corbin Burns, future Cleveland Guardian. Corbin Burns.
So yeah, he was. But that's interesting. They're both right now. He is second to Paul Bird by 1 win. Shane Bieber is in the 4th. Doug Drabeck, who they failed to sign, is number 1 in the 5th round. The highest WAR ever belongs to Chris Archer at 13.4, and the second highest win of anyone who signed. I'm not familiar with Tim Lawler, who didn't sign, a left-hand pitcher out of Arkansas, is Stephen Kwan. Already has the second best WAR. 3rd, Ryan Drees. 4, Zach Putnam, who again really didn't play here at 5. Ben Francisco.
Yeah. So yeah. Kwan, Gaddis, Kaitom, Merriweather, Archer.
They've done really well in the 5th of late, though. Like that's their magic round. It feels like if the 2nd is where they seem to always flub it, the 5th is where they seem to find it.
So does Tanner Bybee blow Chris Archer away? And how many years does he do?
I think so. I mean, listen, Archer was really good for a time there. There's a reason why the Pirates made. And listen, I thought it was a good trade at the time because Tyler Glasnow and Meadows couldn't seem to put it together. They'd been on the cusp for so long. They didn't, it's like, whatever. Hey, go ahead, make that deal. They traded 2 broken prospects, and that was before we knew about the Rays' dark magic. 13.4 is a solid WAR, and it's just unfortunate that like health became an issue. I mean, his age 28, he was an all-star. And he was a really good pitcher for 24, 25, and 26. So yeah, I think he gets past him though. I mean, he essentially was about a 4-year peak guy, and then it's been struggles since then. So I think he's got a chance.
You heard it here first. Jeff is saying Tanner Bybee will be the best Cleveland draft pick out of the 5th round ever. He'll be the best all-time 5th round pick.
If you have you take both of our guests, which is Bybee and Heron, I'll put my name on it. I'll say I predict both those guys will be the greatest draft pick in those rounds in the history of the franchise. And
it's easy for Heron because his round doesn't exist anymore. There's no future guys that can surpass him.
And if you listen to that show, no one from the 29th round has actually played for the Cleveland Guardians / Indians in the history of that pick. Jonathan Van Every, I believe, the outfielder, played a little bit with Boston, and then an infielder, Simple, I want to say, who went over in the Rick Sutcliffe trade. That they traded away that infielder, Jack Sample is probably the top one. In this one, there's a little bit more. If a 10th round pick wants to come on the show, I'll definitely call them the future greatest 10th round pick, as that is just a complete black hole of death and despair. No offense to our friends taken in the 10th round, but I don't think we have anyone who's even been a regular major leaguer to give you an idea with that one. That is like the one round. You can go like all the way to like 30, and every round has produced one major league player except for the 10th.
Interesting. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Now we get to tag this with that draft history piece just for fun. But
yes,
any
do draft history.
We'll see if Jacob Zibin can break it. He's definitely let's put it this way, that Jacob Zibin has over 2 times the highest bonus of the number 2 guy, Tyler Holt, and the 3rd highest bonus was over $1 million less than Jacob Zibin. So he's the odds-on favorite. If you're curious, greatest 10th round pick ever, Paulo Espino. That's what
cousin of Daniel Espino, also playing for Team Panama this year in WBC.
So there we go. Anything else you want to add on our Oreo double stuffed edition here as we're approaching 44 minutes?
I'm just looking at the 2018 draft class now that has Bo Naylor, Nick Sandlin, Richie Palacio, Stephen Kwan, Cody Morris, and Brian Lavastida. It's turning into a pretty good draft class, actually. And then
Hankins can still, Hankins is still around. Torres
still could get something.
Listen, Torres is an interesting arm. He's way behind. They need to move him to the pen, but like he's 2 years removed from injury. I wouldn't shock me if he had a really good year, especially if they just shifted his role and let him be fastball slider as a reliever and go quick. I also really loved, speaking of 10th round picks, Robert Broom. So we'll see if he's still in the organization. I'm rooting for him. I said
that one got swept out from under you.
I did. I put him and Sandlin on an equal footing in that draft class. I'm not going to lie. I mean, Shane McCarthy might get a cup of coffee, even go down this list. I like
Shane McCarthy.
Yeah,
we're just
it's a
rabbit hole
strong
here.
team. This is the fun thing, though, because like 2018 strong draft. We talked about 2016 strong draft. Talked about the 21. Like they're putting together more of these where in between CC Sabathia and Lonnie Chisenhall, they didn't have a single first rounder who became a regular. So it is a nice change from my early years of covering the draft where it was it was ugly times. But I want to thank you all for listening, rating, and reviewing. Tomorrow is the draft, the prospect draft. We are going to go back and forth. There is, who's going to jump on Bo Naylor because there's not much behind him. Is he the first overall pick because of depth? Maybe. It's going to be a debate to be had. And or you jump on pitchers hoping to get two of the big three. You'll have to tune in tomorrow and find out as we build. I don't know if we're going to build a full 25-man roster. Are we going to go that deep? Potentially. We'll see how long it takes. And but thank you all for listening, rating, reviewing, subscribing, clicking that little bell, all that fun jive. We appreciate all of you. And go Guardians, go. And now it is after show, more of the after dark. So I'm going to pop up that Grady Sizemore image right now. I'm kidding. I'm not.
Oh, well, there's no FCC to regulate us here, but someone might get mad at us.
I might get fired. That is not happening. Yeah. I'm going to recreate the shot. I'm kidding. No.
Oh, well, no, I have to go on that note. We did our underrated, overrated yesterday. So yeah. Should we do sleepers and breakouts today?
Sleepers and breakouts, yes. We did.
All right. You want to give us a pitcher and a hitter sleeper.
So pitcher sleeper. This is one I really like. You can see my face. I am kind of mildly. I have two names that I was looking at for this. I'm going to go with the deeper sleeper. I'm not going to go with Parker Messick because he was a relatively high pick. Dylan DeLuca has some people who really like him. I wish I could see his advanced data on some of those pitches. I think he might end up being a breakout candidate for next year. Like if you want to look, listen, we didn't expect Bybee this time a year ago to be the breakout. We thought it'd be Mace or Denholm or Nick Casey or one of those other high picks. And it was Bybee. So if you're looking for a guy who's maybe a little bit down there, I would look at him. The other guy I'm really intrigued by who's not in my top 50. I'll give you a real sleeper. I really liked, now watch me get his name wrong because I'm trying to do it. Austin Peterson, right? That was the UConn pitcher. I really liked him coming out of UConn. I really liked his performance, his numbers. That program has had a history of putting guys into the draft, not necessarily them getting to the big leagues, but it's a sleeper program, cold weather arm, high performing player, could be a chance for growth. Like if you want to look for another guy, you want to look for a deep sleeper, Peterson is interesting just because there's reason to believe he could jump out a little bit more just because of the cold weather, small school, getting coached up. I feel like I wanted to look at his size. He's 6'6". That was the other thing. I thought he was pretty big, just getting bigger and stronger as well. He's got a lot of he's was it clay to mold? I think there's my deep sleeper. I guess for most people, Dylan DeLuca is the deep sleeper, but I feel like I got to go a little bit further down.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan DeLuca is getting some hype along people who follow prospects even more than us. I do like Austin Peterson a little bit. My only concern with him is he Mason Hickman? Mason Hickman, like Peterson was 90, 92 in college with his fastball. I think Hickman was more 88, 90.
And he just
Peterson did throw or what was top 5 in strikeouts last year. Look, the Guardians drafted 3 of the top 5 in strikeouts last year with Peterson, Messick, and Campbell, and then Tanner Hall's up there, who they will draft sometime later this year.
Yeah,
feel pretty good about that.
Maybe that comp B round. I'll call that now.
Yeah, it depends on how far he flies upwards. I don't know. He could fly upwards pretty quickly. Yeah, Peterson's a good one. The fastball slider, I just worry he's going to be like Hickman a little bit. It's tough. This is a tough list. If you take Peterson, you take DeLucia, those two guys are pretty good. I don't know. There's a lot of guys you could pick from that I saw last year. Like relief, you could say Cade Smith, but he's kind of gotten some talk, I think. I don't know. Jacob Zibin, probably too far away to be considered, anything like that. I mean, Nate Furman, we've been pretty high on. I feel like Nate Furman's a good sleeper. Just just because he's not known a lot of places, and he kind of has the Stephen Kwan starter kit on the infield. I don't know. Is Nate Furman too high to go with as a sleeper? If not, that's a hitter. I mean, like Davis Sharp would be a good one too.
Yeah,
Davis Sharp had a pretty underrated year, and I don't know what his position. I don't know what it's going to be for him. Like maybe
he's probably a reliever, but
yeah, I think it's him reliever. He could be a good one. And I said yesterday, Leftwich would be my underrated prospect. I think he's not highly rated at far enough places. If I said he was the underrated prospect, I think my sleeper could still be Ryan Webb. I said him yesterday as well as an underrated prospect. I think with what is he, 2 years out of Tommy John now, Ryan Webb?
He should. Let's see. It was because it was his draft year. So this will be this. No, it was the year before his draft year, right? So he got to pitch a little bit.
He didn't pitch a full season, and because he did pitch last year. So he was coming back from it. So he didn't pitch a full year last year, though. He came back late, but. Yeah, I feel like he's far removed from Tommy John, where Ryan Webb can be a sleeper. I don't think a lot of people are talking about him, and he could move upwards. I'd even say Petey Halpin. I feel like he could still be a sleeper guy too, because a lot of people don't know what he can do, and there's a lot of guys. I guess I'm cheating here and just listing off a bunch, but for pitcher, okay, I'll officially go with Ryan Webb as a sleeper. That's higher than Peterson. You went deep down.
Yeah, and the more, like, I was digging some Peterson. I don't know. I really like him. Like I said, he's got size. He could add some muscle, add some strength. That slider I think that slider could be a plus pitch. So if he had strength, then you got, can add something to that fastball, do what they do. I'm just saying if you want a deep sleeper, you want that guy who's really buried. That's the guy I'm saying paying attention to.
How about, if you want a deep sleeper from me, that people know Ryan Webb, I'll throw out Reed Johnston, kind of similar pitch mix to Austin Peterson, similar size. He's a little bit smaller, but had some really interesting stuff last year, and we'll see how he does against high A. All right, sleeper hitter for you.
This is a lot harder. I'll just be honest. I was going through the list. I'm like, because I was trying to look for someone like outside my top 30 for this, and I was like, there's not a lot of guys outside my top 30 that are deep sleepers. Right. And I feel like, normally when I'm going through, I do spend some time going through the minor leagues. There wasn't too many like guys who really stood out or had like great seasons who weren't like complex guys or were not already names. I don't know, going through my list, it was, I was debating like who do I consider for this? It's like, let's put it this way, from pick 31 to 54, I have 5 hitters. It's not much of a list to pick through, which I know people are Hien and Han. So I'm gonna go with, I don't know if this counts or is even fair, Guy Lipscomb Jr. Another recent draft pick, good speed, high level performance. It's interesting. He's very similar to Nate Furman. Let's see, Furman was in the 4th and Lincecum was in the 5th. Is that right, or was it the other way around? They were back to back. Lipscomb doesn't maybe have the batted ball data, but he might be the better athlete. He kind of has gotten a little bit lost in the in some of the Furman hype. Now, not to say that Furman has hype, but around people who follow it, there is a little bit more run. So I think Lipscomb is interesting. He's a guy that, like, I debated in the 30s. Like, he's going to end up in the 40s on my list, but I debated getting him into the 30s. I think there's a lot of things that to like in that overall profile. It's just, there's not, it's like I thought about Victor as tourist, but really it's like he's a high bonus guy that shouldn't count in my mind as a sleeper. And then a lot of the other guys in this 40 to 50 range, it's like, Planez, who has great batted ball data, but hasn't performed well. Valdez, who, hasn't hit at all and might not. Do you consider Jonathan Rodriguez? I just don't see a pathway for him. People have Diane Frias really high. It's hard to find a guy. And Gabriel Rodriguez, some people might say, but to me, he's a top 30 guy or should be. So that's why I didn't include him. But, if we were talking helium guys, he's probably maybe the guy then.
Yeah, I would say deep sleeper for me has to be Wilfredo Antunez. I think that's a guy. And this is also very statistically based, right? Like, he played, I think, 5 games in high A or low A last year. He got hurt. Was pretty much done for the season after that, I think. But a guy who didn't strike out a lot, took a lot of walks. Again, those are lower in the minors, so all that's with a grain of salt. But there is good batted ball data on him. Interesting build. If you want a guy, again, this is a deep sleeper. We're not talking about as far as hitters go, like you said, Nate Furman, Diane Frias. Those guys are somewhat talked about in some circles. The guy who's probably not talked about almost anywhere is Wilfredo Antunes. Certainly a guy that nobody was talking about a year ago. So I would say, yeah, for sure, Wilfredo Antunes should be that guy. I would, Justin Boyd could even be that guy too, although he's ranked some places a little bit higher too. He just had a very brief debut a year ago. But I'm going to go with Wilfredo Antunes.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I just for fun, I went and pulled up like the runs created plus in the minors, and it's like your top 3 guys are DSL or complex. It's
yeah, and that's all.
Yeah, that's it. It's like we're both kind of high on him, but it's like honestly, probably like compared to everyone else, the name we should probably say is Micah Pries. You and I don't think of him as a down the board guy, I think, but he's probably the guy. It's only because we don't think of him in that way, but he is that way to most. So we should probably actually say it's him.
That's fair.
Put up quite a level of performance.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing with him is I would probably be concerned about the chase rate. He's got to stay in the zone a little bit better, but when he does stay in the zone, everything looks fantastic, right? There's walks, there's power, there's even speed. Some positional versatility. He's not necessarily a sleeper for us because of what we saw last year, but he's probably a sleeper in terms of nobody else is really talking about this guy. And at the very, could be a bench bat in the majors playing first and left field. So, and considering he's on the strong side of the platoon, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that's fair to say him. Okay. So breakouts. I know this is similar to sleepers, but let's say who is a guy outside of your top 25 that could vault their way up?
Mitchell Tolman. I'm kidding. He's no longer in the organization. And the only reason I tease about him is he was 28, and I laugh about that because amongst hitters, like David Fry at 26 was the oldest guy in the Guardians minors last year. So again, just to give an idea of how young this team is, top to bottom, even in the minors. I mean, they only had 3 guys over the age of 25. Will Brennan was essentially an old man amongst hitters at 24. That's how crazy young this system is. The guys who could vault up this year,
maybe outside top 30. I don't know.
Like outside top 30, who's going to vault up? Antunes is definitely a guy. Again, you mentioned him. Looking just at the list here, David Sharp, if he's a starter and not a reliever, I think he's just going to be a reliever. Is someone interesting? I mean, Ethan Hankins, if he comes back from health. For me, I'm going to go with Ryan Webb. I know we've discussed him already, but he was legitimately had a case to be the top left-handed pitcher in that class. Now, University of Georgia, it's been dog poo in terms of pitcher development and success rates. Like, Emerson Hancock is pretty much forgotten about. That's the one blown pick by the Mariners in recent years. Cole Wilcox has gotten hurt. I mean, Derek Lilliquist was a top 10 overall selection out of the University of Georgia, if you want to go way back in the day. Nice. Robert Tyler was, potential top 10 overall guy. It has not gone well for Georgia pitchers. I'm sure someone can pull up the example where it has gone well. No, Spencer Turnbull was Alabama, but it's not gone great, and I still believe in Webb. Having said all of that, like he could have gone so much higher. Like I think he could have with health. If he didn't have the health issues, he would have been, a sure second round pick, potentially a back end first rounder. Didn't get to show a whole lot last year, so he's it's missed a year, missed 20 due to COVID, missed 21 due to injury, missed most of 22 due to injury. That just sets you up to be forgotten. And he's got a chance to really step up this year. Why don't you talk about your pitcher? And that gives me another second to debate my hitter.
Yeah, I already said Webb for my sleeper. I mean, he could break out, and I wouldn't be surprised. I have Webb at at 31, so that would be cheating. We said that
31
outside of our top 30.
for me. Yeah, 31 for me
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, kind of cheating. Like, a guy outside the top 30 that could move in the top 30 easily. Ryan
Well, I
Webb.
mean,
When,
it could also be like Austin Peterson for the reasons I said earlier. Like,
yeah,
that's the other guy where, and I should also qualify my statement about the age thing was qualified hitters. That that might change if I dip down. My list.
I have Trenton Denholm outside my top 30, and I thought, again, when we talked about Tanner Bybee, we talked about how we thought Trenton Denholm would be the Tanner Bybee of a year ago. Excuse me, just pulled a Jeff. I have a new name. Look at that. I think a lot of people thought he would be a little bit higher, and he had an inconsistent season, showed flashes. I think this year he will find more consistency, and he will jump up and final. I think I might have had him for my pitcher breakout last year alongside Will Brennan, and it didn't work out. So I will go back to the well. I mean, I guess you could say Diane Frias is probably an interesting one. Tommy Mace could get it back together and move back up because there's still some history there. But yeah, I will say for pitcher, Trenton Denholm makes his way up the list like I thought he would a year ago. I'll go 0 for 2 maybe.
Yeah, I'm big. Denholm made my top 30, so I can't. Obviously I went with Webb. That's why Denholm wasn't in my discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Hitter, it's a little bit tricky. I was kind of, we were talking about this before too. It's like it's not a great deep group. Like you almost wish they would draft a few more hitters or some of these young guys get promoted. I was just kind of looking at like some of the stats I like to look at for hitters, like looking at some of those things like BABIP, which are a sign of positive contact rates in the lower minors, seeing who stood out with that. And there's a few names in there that got some run. Milan Tolentino, by the way, was top 10 in BABIP and one of the few guys who wasn't a complex league player. Nolan Jones, Richie Palacios, both in the top 20. Benson at 21. When you're looking at some stuff. So I was just kind of going through and just trying to find someone who could be interesting from a statistical performance perspective. And it's hard. Like it's, like the guy I'm kind of intrigued to watch by the BABIP, but it's just because he didn't have a lot of plate appearances, would be more of a Cesar Idrogo. He's actually the highest non-complex player in terms of BABIP. Overall, I think, because it's breakout. It's not like could break out. It's like, who do I think has a real opportunity to ascend the ladder, be that breakout performer?
It's hard. It is hard.
It's very hard. I don't know. Like that's like I go through and it's every statistic. I know I shouldn't say no one, but I do want to take a moment and say like it's not great right now. Like they've definitely hit a point where you're like, okay, so I'm gonna be cheap, and it's Victor is Turris. It's a little cheap to do because he got the same signing bonus as Churio, but he doesn't get talked about. And his Turris, I don't think I saw him in any top 30s. He's almost at 50 for me because he's a complex only guy, but he passes those initial tests, right? Like his K rate was barely above 10%. His walk rate was, he walked more than he struck out. Bloodlines again. The BABIP number was not great. It was all right. He was about league average, but he's a catcher. So, you'll see how it goes with that. He got on base. There wasn't a ton of power. It might be a little cheap, but he's the guy you kind of look at. He limited, that's like I said, that's the first separator, is not striking out too much. He did that. The other guy to maybe watch as a bounce back guy, I believe there were health issues. I guess maybe this would be Louis Durango. Like a lot of people really liked him in his signing year, and there's again some positive data. But I just think honestly, like we've seen them go kind of pitcher heavy the last few years in the draft, and then use the international market to get hitters. Some of these international guys will get promoted this year, and hopefully we'll see what Juan Benjamin can do, what is Torres can do. I feel like the next wave of those guys is going to get shoved up, and hopefully we'll see something. Or maybe it's time to spend some draft picks. We'll also see the guys like DeLauder moving into the lower minors. Not that he would ever be a sleeper, but maybe Logan Clark, the day 3 guy, the catcher. It's like, it's, but yeah, it's definitely a little bit concerning how bare it is in high
Yeah.
A and low A in terms of hitting prospects who are not like the big names.
Yeah, it's tough to go through. I mean, I would probably pick up Juan Benjamin as a guy who's got good data lower in the minors. Like, I could see Jake Fox taking off too. Like, we've been a little bit low on him, and I could see him having a good offensive year once he gets a little bit stronger and has to make some. He's just got to swing the bat more. I think he is one of those guys that is, swing less and succeed. So we'll see what he can do there. I said Antunes for a sleeper. Gosh, the hitter, honestly, the hitter that could break out this year, it's easy to say guys that are a lot higher. Like I said, Furman before could be a sleeper, but he could also break out across the board to people who do this for a living and don't see just one team. Juan Brito wouldn't surprise me. Like, I know some people are high on Juan Brito, but I feel like he's a guy that could vault himself into more of a conversation. Churio for sure. I don't know. Let's talk about a guy. Like I said, a year ago, my pick was Will Brennan. I didn't see him making the majors last year, but I saw him finally getting some love among the prospect community. Even now, he's not getting that much love, to be honest with you, which surprises me. So I would say I think people are ready for a Jason Churio breakout, even though he's just going to be in stateside for the first time. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if you want a deep sleeper, like, okay, deep breakout guy that will get talked about among prospect lists, I think will be Rafael Ramirez, who's a DSL guy. But if you want to talk about a guy stateside, even though we're both higher on him, I would say Petey Halpin might finally take a step forward this year and be the guy Will Brennan last year. Not make the majors, but I think is Petey coming up on his Rule 5 year this year right now? Is this winter going to be his?
He's 2 years away because he's the Logan Allen class.
Okay, so
away.
I think he could vault himself into discussion this year.
The other interesting guys like Jose Cedeno, again, he's a DSL guy, but had the unreal contact rates and for a long time was the number one guy in runs created plus. Now he's as far away as you can get. And the other catcher, Manuel Mejias, is that guy who we talked about in the catching episode. He's kind of interesting, has performed well, but they're so far away. It's like the chances of success are very low compared to the field because we just don't have a lot of data. And then, it's like I said, it's such. I mean, listen, it is pitching heavy, and that's what happens when you spend as many picks as they've had on those guys because you get more data, right? When you get a college player, you get more data. It is a safer bet. Then it's a higher chance of success when a guy is 21, 22 versus signing him at 17.
Right.
I mean, it's not in an exact science. That's pretty, obvious. So we'll see. And again, this isn't like, oh no, they're in trouble. This is still a top 5 minor league system. They can always trade pitching for hitting. Who knows? Maybe they'll trade pitching. Well, I mean, unless you're moving someone like Curry or Gaddis, it's not, or, they're not going to make a trade for depth in the minors, but they might even trade upper level hitting for lower level hitting like they just did with Benson for Boyd. Like I wouldn't be shocked if there's another trade or two like that before camp ends, just to help clear up some spots. But and eventually we'll see. Hey, maybe they'll get someone for Owen Miller who's going to slot in and be that interesting hitter in the lower minors when that deal is finally announced. But that's kind of it, I believe. Do you have anything else you wanted to add, throw out?
Nope, that is our show for today.
Yeah,
the prospect draft tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow's the prospect draft. You can kind of see our takes on all of it. But thank you all for listening to this extra long edition. It's top prospects. Of course, the two of us, we're going to go long. Thank you all for rating and reviewing, downloading. It helps. Subscribe, like, all that jazz. You know what to do. You have heard me say it 1.5 million times. Thank you all for being a part of the Locked On Guardians family/team, and go Guardians go. Pitchers and catchers are reporting for duty.